God, Mum, you're not on Tinder.
Most people call it plenty of fuck.
We're going to make you a profile.
The Playing with Matches podcast, where women talk about their experiences dating online. Hello, and welcome to Playing with Matches. My name is Mark, and regular listeners will know that during the second UK lockdown, I, along with my producer and my mother, those are two separate women, by the way, though you could argue that my mum is my original producer, the OG. Anyway, we interviewed dozens of women about their experiences of online dating, and that has formed the basis of this podcast, with each interviewee getting their own episode. And today we are on episode 10. We've reached double figures, 2 handfuls. Thank you for noticing. A round number, although only the second digit of the number 10 is actually rounded. This is a decasode, if you will. And why would you? Well, today we hear from Lorna. Now I'd need to check with Joanna who set this meeting up, but I'm pretty sure that Lorna is the very first person we interviewed in this process. And I remember I met her sofa before I met her. She was out of shot somewhere. I made some comment, she chuckled, and the ice was broken. And Lorna knows all about what is funny, as she's learning to be a stand-up comedian. Or at least she was when she was being interviewed. She may well be established on the comedy circuit by now. She could even have her own stalker. Let's hope not. Sent from my iPhone. So Lorna was brought up, by her own words, in the middle of nowhere, and very much felt like the only gay in the village. Then at the age of 18, she moved to Brighton, and obviously that was no longer the case. She is visually impaired, and says that without dating apps, and the internet in general, she would find it very difficult to meet people. She can't see your photos, so what you write in your bio is even more important to her than perhaps it is for the rest of us. And a lot of those bios fall quite short of the mark, unfortunately. She's had some relationships out of the process, both platonic and romantic. She's had some disastrous meetings, one in particular that sounds traumatizing, and she's had some fun too. So I'll let her tell you all about it. I'll be back at the end for coffee and crumpets. Until then, take it away, Lorna.
I'm Lorna, I'm 28. I grew up in the Kent countryside, proper middle of nowhere, the kind of place where there's no phone signal. It was very quiet, and it's very conservative Daily Mail readers. Growing up in Kent, it literally did feel like the only gay in the village. So then I came to Brighton when I was 18 for the music college and subtextually for the gay scene. So I probably first kind of joined dating sites when I was about 16. Secondary school, which is always difficult. It was just about talking to people outside of my world. I didn't have a great time in school. I didn't love school, kind of socially didn't have a great time. And coupling that with living in a very isolated place, the internet was really the only place to go. So yeah, I started kind of looking online, particularly as I was sort of exploring my sexuality, which again is definitely not easy to do in secondary school. So yeah, probably joined them when I was about 16. Definitely not something my parents would have approved of at that age. Just really because of all of the safety issues with you don't know who you're talking to and etc. And of course, this was like 12 years ago where the whole online dating thing wasn't so much a thing. You know, nowadays everybody does it. I had a few kind of just chats with people. Didn't kind of physically meet anybody until I was about 18. Yeah, and then kind of met a few people. And then when I was a month off 21, I met somebody I was then in a long-term relationship with for 5.5 years. I think one of the kind of the first main dating sites I joined, which then became an app, was Plenty of Fish, which is still around now. And I seem to remember you can join that at 16, 17. So yeah, that one. And that's actually the one that I eventually met my ex-partner on. Back then, and about sort of 10 years ago, it was becoming one of the most successful ones, and everybody knew somebody who'd met somebody on it. Not so much the case anymore, I believe. Yeah, it's just different. It's really different now. After I've kind of been back on it after my kind of long relationship ended and I hadn't done dating sites for a while, and it's really different to how it used to be. I don't think it was like it wasn't, obviously not being an app, it wasn't a swiping thing, but it wasn't a kind of liking. I remember some of the early ones I went on were literally just chat sites, really. There were a few of these little chat sites that were just aimed at just all female. I think one of the first ones I ever joined was called Girls Web or something like that. And that wasn't really a dating thing. It was just chat to other people on it, kind of with the view that everybody on there was also there to talk to other girls. So yeah, it wasn't very sophisticated. It wasn't a dating matching system. It was just who's online. You can click on them and talk to them. It was like breaking out of my little bubble in the countryside, talking to people in different parts of the country. And I think when you're a teenager and you're going through all this stuff, hormones are going crazy, feelings are going crazy, and then you find out that there are other people, having similar experiences. And that, I think that's a big thing. I think my world was naturally quite isolated, and that opened up this whole other world of other people outside of my little village that you can't, like, as well. Being visually impaired myself, I have very little freedom because really you need to be able to drive to live where my family live. So it wasn't easy for me to kind of just to go out and meet people. If I wanted to, I'd need a lift somewhere. My school was a drive away. So yeah, kind of the talking to people on the internet just opened up this whole world of possibility. I actually met somebody who's still a very good friend now on that first website, Girls Web. I think we met when I probably just turned 18. And yeah, we met on this chat site, and like I say, we're still friends now, 10 years later. So a lot of my friendships even have come from the kind of the online world, as well as not just relationships. I think that I did build friendships, and I talked to loads of people back then that I don't talk to anymore. Loads of people that I never actually physically met. So I came to Brighton when I was 18. 10 years this year in Brighton. Came from the music college. Kind of loved the atmosphere of the place. Studied for 2 years, but then find it hard to imagine being anywhere else now. So I've ended up doing a couple of courses this year. Sort of ended up doing the same course twice or 1.5 times because of when lockdown hit. And you can't teach being funny, really. It's more about teaching about we basically write material every week and perform it sort of 2 minutes per week. And it then gets critiqued on kind of the performance and how you deliver it and stuff like that. But I did, and the reason I kind of responded to Joanna's post in the first place was just that I found I was writing a lot of material about my Tinder experience, definitely over the last couple of years. So the first person I met from online was a disaster. Not a very nice person, but who also had a lot of issues. And I had quite poor mental health at this point, and I sort of latched onto somebody else who had kind of poor mental health. I guess I thought we could relate to each other, when as it turned out, it was just a disaster in every way, really. We spoke for months. We only physically met once, and that was a mess, which ended up with her in hospital because she'd taken an overdose, which she did very frequently. But yeah, kind of a real messed up situation. Not a good advert for the first person I met online. So yeah, no, the second one I met was okay. It didn't turn into a relationship. It was more of a friendship. And yeah, kind of chatted for a while, physically met up a few times. She was into music. She created music like me. So that was kind of what we initially talked about. I actually ended up becoming friends with one of her friends who I'd met through her. So yeah, I wasn't I wasn't on these things every day looking, but I was probably still kind of glancing at them. Yeah, so I got a long-term relationship out of Plenty of Fish, which, like I say, at the time was everybody's success story. Everyone knew someone who'd met on Plenty of Fish. And it seemed like, it was a free one. I'd never paid for any dating sites. There was all like Match.com and stuff that you had to pay for. I'd never done that. But Plenty of Fish was very widely regarded as the most successful and the better one of the free ones. And I liked it because people tended to write things on their profiles. Because for me, I can't see pictures. So for me, the entirety of why I would talk to somebody online is based on their bio, is based on what they say about themselves and if they sound like an interesting person to me. Oh, now it's just like I said, it's changed a lot because when I was on Poff Plenty Fish, before my long-term relationship, when I was on there, and I liked it. I'd say people would write longer bios about themselves. And then I went back on it after becoming single again about 2 years ago. And it was just completely different. And just, I don't know, the quality of person and what they would write about themselves has completely changed. And now some people won't bother. Some people will just write like, fill this in later. And it's like, we obviously haven't. Or you'd get, I did see one that just said blah, blah, blah. I immediately don't like that person, but I immediately like, if that's what you want to put on your bio, yeah, I'm not going to message someone who puts that. You know, some people will just write, message me and ask. And I'm like, but, you know, if you write something about yourself, you've got someone to message somebody about. If somebody just writes, message me and ask, I'm just not going to. You've got to give me a starting point. Yeah, we met on Plenty of Fish. It was actually, I remember the night because I lived in Brighton, but I had come back and I was staying at my mum's for some reason. And I was just kind of bored of an evening and had a little browse. And the first thing she said to me, the first thing she messaged me was basically saying kind of, hi, but by the way, just so you know, just looking for friends. She'd not long broken up with somebody. So yeah, the platonic dialogue lasted about a week, I think. And that it was about a week it was only about a week and a half between that first message and physically meeting. And then, yeah, she lived in London, I lived in Brighton. And pretty much from the first weekend, she came to Brighton every weekend from then on. It all got a bit full on quite quickly. But I don't know, it was a natural progression. And then after just over a year, she moved down to Brighton, got a new job. I was more attached to Brighton than she was to London. Yeah, not like after 6 weeks, not like typical, that's the lesbian cliche. Didn't do that. It was over a year. But yeah, kind of at that point, it's a good old Plenty of Fish success story. Which obviously we're no longer together, but a 5-year relationship out of it. So something worked for a while. She lives and works very near me in Hove, which I suppose is the disadvantage of somebody moving down to live with me and then breaking up. But no, we don't really speak. I got back on the apps quite quickly, not necessarily because I was ready for a relationship, but because I just wanted to talk to people, really. And I kind of wanted to know what was going on now. It had been a while. I'd never used Tinder because Tinder had sort of come about during my relationship, really. So yeah, Tinder was new to me. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to be able to use it very well because my understanding of it was, you see someone's picture and you swipe. And I thought maybe there wouldn't be much in it for me if it's all picture based. And I was actually pleasantly surprised at how many people do write a little bio on there. And like I say, there's been a huge variation of what people write on there. But the larger majority actually do. And I went back on Plenty of Fish, and that was when I realized, God, Plenty of Fish is awful now. And Tinder is somehow better. I've also kind of been talking to men and women, which I always did, but I never had a relationship with a man before. Yeah, you can just set your Tinder profile to see everybody, which is cool. Another thing you can't do on Plenty of Fish, you have to pick one. So yeah, and I always used to have really good male friends, and during my relationship, we had a lot of female friends, and I kind of missed a bit of male company. I'm quite slightly into male-dominated things myself, really. I like football. The musical world tends to be quite male-dominated. So yeah, I sort of missed having more male friends in my life. Obviously, not everybody is on Tinder to make friends. I did meet up with people, and I did hook up with a few people. But yeah, I just kind of did what I felt I needed to do after a long-term relationship, really. That had been from age 20 to 26. So for me, I felt like I had some kind of living in my 20s to do. But I slept with a few people. I'm not really big on kind of one-night stands. I'd rather sort of, I wasn't wanting a relationship, but I would rather kind of casually see somebody, but see the same person a few times. I'm not massive on one-nighters. I did have a couple of them because things don't always work out. But yeah, I actually met one guy a few months after the end of my relationship who we met up and we got on really well and we saw each other a few times. And that was fine. Neither of us wanted to call it a relationship. But yeah, just kind of hung out, drank wine. You could say I've had my fun in the last couple of years with living the single life. I mean, The messages some people send are just unbelievable. I think I sometimes get messages or read bios and just think, how can you possibly think that's going to work? Or how can you think I'm going to like that? And even if I'm not interested in a relationship, even if I am mostly meeting up with somebody kind of with a hookup with sex in mind, I still don't want you to put it like that. Like there are some really common themes you'll see on bios. This is particularly with guys, I'm sorry to say. But there are some really common themes where you'll get things like, something I've seen multiple times is a bio that just says kind of 6 feet 4 inches, and that's 2 measurements. I'm like, wow, okay, beautiful. I saw one literally the other day. And the only thing the bio said was 20 centimeters. And I'm just like, well, there's only one thing he could be referring to, isn't there? And yeah, he thought that's all he needed to put on his bio, which is slightly more impressive than 4 inches. But I saw one guy that just put just a bit of a dick. I'm like, okay, good to know. Won't message you. Someone put on their bio, they just put really quite boring. And that's just, okay, swipe the other way.
The flags one, which is what a lot of people do, is they'll just put, instead of a bio that says anything, they'll just put a load of flags, and it will either be where they're from or it'll be countries they've visited. And it's some people will be like, oh, I've traveled and I've visited 15 different countries, and then they'll just put 15 flags. And it just, I'm not interested. It doesn't tell me that you're an interesting person. It's just flags. And also, when you're reading this with a screen reading technology, so you don't just glance at the flags. My phone will be saying like flag of, I don't know, flag of Australia, flag of New Zealand, flag of France, flag of Spain. And that'll take ages for somebody to visit. From my point of view, if they've written something really interesting after all the flags, I'm probably not going to stay long enough to hear that. So yeah, that for me is the kind of immediate turn off.
Just, I don't understand what goes through people's minds when they're trying to sell themselves. I mean, I don't try and sell myself, but I just write a bio about me and tell people a little bit about who I am. I kind of, like I say, I've dated men and women. I would always say women are my preference. If I'm going to have another long-term relationship, it will be a woman. It won't be a man, because I've never loved a man, but I do enjoy their company. But then there are some of the messages I get on Tinder just remind me as why I don't actually really want to be with a guy. I just get guys they don't even say hello sometimes. I've just had a message that would be like, fancy a bang. And there was a guy that would do this just every now and again, just be like, fancy a bang. And he never even put a question mark. So I just interpreted that as just a statement. But like I say, even if that is the reason I'm talking to somebody, I'm still not going to respond to a message that forward. Say hello first. I don't tend to sleep with people I can't at least have a conversation with as well. Like, there needs to be a bit of conversation, some kind of connection. So yeah, that doesn't do it for me. And my favourite one, which is the one I told Joanna the other day, and this was only about 3 or 4 weeks ago, someone I matched with on Tinder, and he just sent me a message, and it was just one word, and that word was horny. One word message. That's it. Nothing else. I mean, I don't understand what goes through somebody's head to send that to you as an opening message. But I was sat with a friend waiting for a takeaway, so I just replied with hungry. That was my honest response. And he didn't respond again. I kind of wanted to say to him, have you done that with many people? Like, has that got you anywhere? Did anybody reply and say, okay, let's go? I've had some where you've been talking to somebody and they start asking for pictures. And I refuse to send pictures. You can see pictures of me doing things with clothes on. I don't send people naked pictures. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they'll do with them. So my policy is I don't send a picture to, particularly not somebody I haven't met. And I was talking to someone a while ago, probably pre-lockdown, when we were actually allowed to meet people. And I was talking to someone who was quite nearby, kind of within 10 kilometers or so, according to Tinder. So, not a great distance. And he'd said about sending pictures. And I was like, well, I prefer to meet people. Like, shall we go for a drink instead? And he unmatched me because I wouldn't do pictures. And I was actually offering to meet him. So he turned down the real thing because I wouldn't send him pictures, which I just thought was quite bizarre. Surely the real thing is more exciting, I would hope. Which I could understand if he was like 500 miles away and looking for just some pictures, but this was not the case at all. So yeah, that happens quite a bit. I'll get people who just don't, and they'll send me pictures, and I just kind of go, well, it doesn't do anything for me. I don't always tell them why. And like I'd been talking to somebody recently who actually we were having quite intelligent conversation, and then he mentioned about pictures, and I was like, I told him they didn't do anything for me, and because we've been talking for a while, I told him. And I said, I can't see very well. I can't see pictures on the screen. And his response was, have you ever considered surgery? Which was the strangest response I've had to that particular admission. Not kind of, is surgery possible? But have you considered surgery? He's either thinking, what, in my 28 years, I'm going to go, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. Like, or have I considered it and thought, nah, I'm just going to live with it? Like, no, it was a strange question. And I just replied and said, of course I've considered it. Sadly not an option. And he hasn't spoken to me since either. So, but yeah, that's a whole other minefield, dating with a disability. It's more complicated. I don't tell people straight off. I don't put it in my bio because I would prefer somebody to have a conversation with me to figure out I'm a person and then put that bit of information on them rather than that being the first thing they know about me and the first thing they think about me. So I would always tell somebody before I actually met them so they weren't too surprised. No, I don't tell people straight away because it is just a fact that it freaks some people out and some people aren't going to be okay with it and some people are going to be absolutely fine with it. But yeah, it makes it harder. And if I'm actually looking for a real meaningful relationship, it makes that harder because it's something that somebody else has to deal with. Not like they've got to do an awful lot for me, maybe read the post. But, I live alone now. So yeah, it's not that somebody has to be my carer or anything like that, but it is, it is still a factor. It makes me slightly harder to date than somebody else maybe. So yeah, it brings in a complication, and if it ruins a conversation, then I know that's not the right person. Yeah, and I think that is one thing where guys can be easier than girls because guys tend to be a bit more laid back and just be a bit like, okay, fine. One of the first guys I met up with on Tinder after the end of my relationship, probably about 4 or 5 months after, we talked for a while, got on quite well. He actually lived only a couple of roads away from me, ended up meeting up. We'd agreed that neither of us really wanted a one-nighter. We'd kind of said if it goes well, I'd like it to be more than a one-nighter, and I'm like, fine. When it came to it, no exaggeration, his penis was too big. Couldn't deal with it. Painful on my side. And he was a bit offended that I wouldn't see him again. So yeah, he did warn me that it was big, but I wasn't very experienced with penises at that point. So that was a bit of a rude awakening into the world of Tinder. So I actually, the funny thing is I actually passed him on to a friend because when I told her this story, she was quite interested, and she ended up seeing him for a few times. So there you go. One person's too big, there's another person's perfect. I don't know. But yeah, I've met people I've got on with. The one guy that I mentioned earlier that I saw a few times, he then got a job in Nottingham and disappeared, which was a slight shame. And then there was another guy that I saw a couple of times, and he got a job somewhere else in the country. So I don't know if this is me. I don't know if I should be worried, or it's just been unfortunate. And the two guys have genuinely got jobs elsewhere and moved away. Who knows? Still on them. Obviously, lockdowns made it all a little bit different. Yeah, that's completely changed the whole dynamic because you're not supposed to meet up with people. So I actually went and stayed at my mum's for a while in the first lockdown, so kind of back in the isolated countryside. But it was very different to when I used to live there. I had regular Zoom things going on with friends, and nobody was allowed to see each other. So it wasn't just kind of me feeling isolated in this world of other people who weren't so isolated. It was everybody's isolated. But yeah, sort of the whole, it's been a little bit like I've still been looking on Tinder. I've still chatted to a few people, but kind of what's the point when you're not actually allowed to meet people? And something interesting I've noticed is there's been a lot of people using this global feature on Tinder. So you can talk to people in another country, not just people who are near you, which to be honest, I don't bother with. I don't see the point. If I see that I've matched with somebody and they're 6,000 miles away, I just have no interest because I'm not really interested in having a pen pal. I'm only really interested in people that I might potentially at some point, when we're allowed, meet up with. So yeah, this year has it's changed the whole landscape of it. I met a guy for a drink a couple of months ago when that was allowed. Went for a drink outside and actually just had zero in common and nothing to talk about. And it was the longest drink in the world. Okay. So this year has been different, but I'm still single. I'm still on the site, so I still chat to people. I've actually been kind of chatting to someone for the last week or so, just by message. So yeah, it's really hard to meet new people. I've actually made, because I'm in the music world, one of my best friends, I met her online, not on a dating site. I think it was Gumtree, because she was a singer and she advertised she wanted a guitarist to play with. And so we met that way and became really good friends. Vice versa to like the band I'm in, that was through the singer putting up a Facebook post looking for the band. I've actually, whether it's dating sites or just online in general, a lot of the people I've met have been through the internet. And so I think it's a really positive thing, and it opens up a world. And especially now, even when the pubs opened up in the summer, it's table service only. You can't mingle. You can't go and talk to another table. How can you possibly, meet somebody in a bar in the same way that you might have done before? I think now it's even more important. The world has changed this year. How we do things has to change. Everything's virtual now. So yeah, like I say, you can't just walk up to a stranger and meet them. Not that I ever did, but other people do. So yeah, it opens up the possibilities. And the long relationship that I did have, while it didn't end well, it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the internet. We would never have met, because she lived in London, I lived in Brighton. So yeah, and particularly, from my point of view as someone with a vision impairment, it's massive for me. I can't look across a room and make eye contact with somebody. So, I can't just look around and walk up to somebody. So from my point of view as well, it levels the playing field a little bit. Yeah, it definitely opens up possibilities for me. I think, write a decent profile. Obviously, always be safe. You have to meet strangers. It's important to be safe, which I have to admit that I haven't always been. I have met people at my flat before, which is silly and not advisable. And I do try and always meet people at a pub first, or, somewhere public, have a drink. Even if you're meeting, some people do use apps like this just for hookups, whereas I prefer to have a drink with somebody first. But, the advice is all the same advice, and just be safe. You are still meeting strangers. I think it's easier to tell from if people link to their social media, it's easier to tell from an Instagram or a Facebook if it's a fake profile with no friends or whatever. So, you can try and learn a lot about somebody by online, but yeah, still safety is important. Yeah, I think my advice as well is just don't necessarily take it too seriously. Just, I've kind of gone out there with the feeling of nothing to lose. I didn't delve straight back into the dating sites after a long-term relationship because I wanted another long-term relationship. I just wanted to talk to new people and have new experiences. I think, my kind of feeling of nothing to lose, see what happens. That's the way I view it, and quite a kind of laid back. Yeah, see what happens. Take it as it comes. Don't expect too much. Don't expect to meet the love of your life after being on an app for a day. But equally, prepare for the fact that it might happen. It might do. I'm still hoping.
So that was lovely, Lorna. Sounds like she's had some adventures. And it's really interesting to hear about the differences using dating apps when you're visually impaired. I can't quite get the idea out of my head where she has a computerized voice reading out someone's profile and they've opened with a load of flags. So before she can get to the good stuff, she has to sit through flag of Greece, flag of Germany, flag of China, flag of Jamaica. I can see why you might swipe left on that one. But not for the first time, we've heard that online dating can really be a lifeline for some people. Those isolated, those still learning about their sexuality, those with a disability. I always find it refreshing to hear about the good that technology can do, rather than just how AI is going to destroy us all. So some really interesting stuff there, I thought. What did you think? If you have any thoughts, opinions, questions, or banana bread recipes, then please feel free to get in touch with us. Although I should tell you, Lorna's date with a very large penis, I don't have his contact details, I'm afraid. But for all other matters, the email address is playingwithmatchespodcast@gmail.com. All one word, playingwithmatchespodcast@gmail.com. So come and say hi or whatever. I think that about wraps us up for this week. Thanks so very much to Lorna for her honesty and her wisdom. Thank you as always to Joanna Sokomska for making the interview happen. And thank you out there for listening. It really does mean a lot. So until next week, good luck out there and on there. Bye-bye.